The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to this edition of Insights, everybody. I'm Marissa McKay, and joining me today are three members of the community who are professionals in the realm of finances. Today we're going to be discussing how to navigate this uncertain financial situation many people are currently finding themselves in. Joining me is Christy Schulze, Mark Ferguson, and Christy Van Massenhoef. Thank you guys for joining me today. All right, so the first thing that I think everybody would like to hear about is the fiscal cliff. Have we fallen off of it yet, and what are some of the big concerns that you guys have regarding the fiscal cliff?
Well, I guess I'll start on that one. Well, the fiscal cliff is a weird name for increasing or decreasing government spending and increasing taxes. And that supposedly is so radical for our economy to absorb that it would reduce GDP by 3.5%, which puts us negative, which throws us into recession, all this stuff. So there's a lot of fog and uncertainty really around the drama of those two things happening, and they call it the fiscal cliff. The deal was reached at the end of the year, in the final hours, actually 2 or 3 hours into this year, and that really only addressed the tax piece of it. The more interesting piece that's going to happen is the government spending, the reduction in government spending. So that's going to happen around the end of February. They've deferred it out, which is right at the same time they're going to talk about increasing the debt ceiling. So those are going to be some interesting times. I think those discussions are going to take us away from the talk about the fiscal cliff and more into some other kind of economic things. And of course, Congress is going to posture back and forth. They're going to wait till the 11th hour to make their decisions and negotiate everything out. But I think it's going to make the tax discussions in September or in December that we just went through, it's going to make that look like a pillow fight when it happens in February.
Okay, and now Christy, from your perspective as a CPA, what are some of the biggest concerns people are coming to you with regarding the fiscal cliff?
Well, immediately right now, in the short term, people are probably noticing that the first paycheck that they received in 2013 contained an increase in Social Security. So actually, and it was indeed a 2% increase, but what I'd like to remind people of is that this is actually just reverting back to the way that things were a couple years ago. It used to always be that the employer and the employee each paid 6.2% Social Security. However, in an attempt to aid a struggling economy a few years ago, they reduced the employee withholding by 2%, making it 4.2%. However, now that temporary rescission is over, it's reverted back to the 6.2%. So, although it's not going to really make anybody any happier about paying an extra 2%, just kind of a note that it isn't really a tax increase, but rather reverting back to the way things were in the past.
Okay, and what about somebody who's self-employed, somebody who doesn't deal with an employer, but who is self-employed?
I would like to remind self-employed individuals to make sure that they keep this in mind when they're making their quarterly estimates throughout the year for their self-employment taxes, which is basically Social Security and Medicare for self-employed individuals, plus their income taxes, to include this additional 2% because it affects them as well.
Okay, and now Mark, regarding your position as a financial planner, financial advisor, what are some things that people are coming to you with in the new year that you think is a direct effect from this fiscal cliff?
Well, we've gotten questions recently about the taxability of municipal bonds. Are tax-free municipal bonds going to become taxable because they've always been tax-free? I think people are concerned about, well, primarily baby boomers are concerned about their personal health, their family health, and thirdly, saving on their taxes, And so really, Christy's the one that's probably going to be a lot more busier than me. But for me, it's making sure that people's portfolios are positioned to be tax sensitive, knowing that we're going from an environment where we've had a 50-year low in tax rates to probably rising tax rates, and that's going to last for a long time. I mean, the spending cuts that government's talking about are not going to cover it. I mean, they've only identified $1.2 trillion right now, which is only 3% of the 9-year budget. So the cuts are going to have to go deep, and the taxes are going to go up for some individuals. But for me, it's more, I think, just planning to have tax-sensitive investments and make sure portfolios are set up right.
Okay, and for the people who are going to be the most hit by some of these changes, can we talk a little bit about who those people are, and if they don't already know?
Sure. Probably the people that, what concerns me the most immediately would be people that have over $80,750 worth of income that now will be subject to alternative minimum tax and previously had not. The threshold was significantly higher, I mean just shy of $200,000 in the past, so that area between $80,000 and just shy of $200,000, those people never were hit with this AMT. And what it actually is back in the late 60s there was alternative minimum tax enacted in order to make sure that wealthy people paid at least a minimum amount of tax. Well, the definition of wealthy has changed since the late 60s, and it has not adjusted for inflation. It has been patched each year all along. The patch is now gone, and it will be adjusted for inflation from this point forward, but instead of kicking in at around $200,000, it is now kicking in at just over $80,000. So if you have a lot of itemized deductions, if you're deducting children, that sort of thing, you may be subject to this additional tax that you've never heard of before, that's always been there but maybe just hasn't affected you. So this is a major concern for a lot of middle income America.
Okay, and so what can people, middle income America, what can they do? What sort of, I guess, avenues do they have to help themselves navigate this new situation?
Tax planning would probably be the best thing that I could suggest. Coming in and knowing ahead of time, making appropriate decisions, possibly talking to your financial planner, putting more away for retirement, that sort of thing, as opposed to coming in the beginning of April to get your taxes done and being shocked.
Okay, Mark, do you have anything to add?
No, I would agree with that. You know, funding your IRA, which is a tax deduction for a lot of individuals. By the way, those limits have gone up this year, so now you can deduct, I think, $5,500 into an IRA and an extra $1,000 if you're over 50. So those are some ways to mitigate some of those new taxes that people are going to get hit with.
So now moving into some of the legal aspects to the fiscal cliff. You know, we've talked about taxes, we've talked about the financial side, but Christy, in your profession, you deal a lot with estate taxes. So can you just tell me, is people's ability to gift money to friends and family, is that going to be affected by the new tax laws?
It is affected, but it's increased. For example, the annual gift tax has increased to $14,000 per year, meaning that an individual can give a gift of property to friends or family of $14,000 or to a married couple of $28,000 without being taxed. If you give more than that, you need to speak to a professional about how they may be taxed, because there are some nuances with the law that it would potentially allow you not to be taxed if it's over that, but you, again, would have to speak to a professional for your individual situation. The estate tax is now increased to $5.25 million, meaning that you can give over the lifetime of, over someone's lifetime, $5.25 million to an individual without being taxed. Anything above that will be taxed at 40%.
Okay, and how is that different from what we were dealing with before?
The estate tax has changed almost every year. For a number of years, it was at $3 million, it was at $1 million. We didn't have one for a year, so it's been bouncing all around, and now it's landed at $5.25 million. There is a good indication it'll be at that for a while, but then again, who knows what Congress is going to do?
Right, exactly. The uncertainty, again, the theme of this whole insight. So if you guys want to stay tuned, the next segment we will be discussing some of the major concerns that each of these professionals deals with in their jobs going forward in 2013. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Insights, everybody. Now we're going to sort of dovetail into the U.S. economy in general. How is it doing, and what are some of the concerns that these professionals have in their jobs with their clients? Now, Mark, for the U.S. economy, are we still recovering from the recession? And in general, in your opinion, how is it doing?
Well, I think it's doing a lot better than people think, but it's really difficult for investors because there is this constant fog of uncertainty. You know, the media coverage is information overload, no offense, but you know, years ago, 50 years ago, it was Walter Cronkite for 45 seconds talking about the economy. Now it's 40 or 50 stations 24/7, and everybody's an armchair analyst, and there just is a lot of drama out there. The reality is that the economy has continued to grow over the last few years. It's going slow. I mean, Bernanke wants it at 3%, it's growing at 2 or under, and he needs it to grow because a growing economy creates jobs. Jobs create paychecks, which are going to get taxed, but paychecks create consumer spending, which drives 70% of our economy. It's spending is what drives it. But let me just give you a couple quick facts out there that people probably don't hear in the media because they don't tend to hear the good news. Consumer payments on debt are at their lowest since the 90s. Okay, we've created 4.4 million jobs since 2010. And the thing you have to understand about jobs, there's 60 million jobs that come into this country and go out of this country every year. So when you see that we created 4 million, we probably created 64 million and lost 60. So we're only looking at the change. But people get so focused on that, like that's the only jobs. But we have created some jobs. Unemployment's at a 4-year low. Construction starts and building permits are at a 4-year high. Housing prices have been rising for 9 consecutive months. We've had corporate earnings have been growing for 2.5 years. The balance sheets are carrying about about 1.7 trillion in cash, which is 3 times what they carried before the Great Recession. So companies are rich, but they're unwilling to spend it to expand, to hire people because they're concerned about payroll tax. They're concerned about under Obamacare what's healthcare going to cost for every employee. So they're kind of sitting on their money. But the reality is that the economy has grown pretty strong. The fundamentals are really good out there. And we think 2013 is going to be another year of positive growth for the markets.
Okay, and now looking at Alpena specifically, you've lived here for a number of years, you've worked here for a number of years. Have you seen some of these positive facts happen here as a microcosm to the national scene?
Absolutely. You know, we've seen a lot of companies that are crawling out of this. You know, what I think is confusing for people, though, is they have to understand that jobs is the last thing to get fixed when an economy recovers. Okay, the stock market's the first indicator to go down. When we go into a recession, jobs is the last thing. So when companies had to learn how to run themselves with 20% less employees, they figured out how to do it. So if jobs are the last thing to be fixed and you're in Alpena and you're waiting for your neighbor to go back to work, that's probably not a good indicator that the economy is doing well. The economy's been doing well, and unfortunately there's going to be some neighbors that aren't going to go back to work because we figured out how to get the job done without them, and that's the sad part. But I think, you know, Alpena has picked up, you know, in our country we're running about 8% unemployment. Even though we've created a lot of jobs, we've gone from 10% to 8%. In Alpena, I think our unemployment was running about 16% a couple years ago. I haven't seen what it is lately. I'm sure it's better than it was. But yeah, I think we're seeing some of that positiveness here locally. It's difficult, though, and let me just close with this. It's difficult in a state like Michigan, where we're number 50 in economic growth, number 49 in unemployment, you know, to be in the state that's at the bottom of the barrel economically, because 80% of Michigan is manufacturing, which is not what builds our economy. It's consumer spending. So, you know, we're in a tough spot in Michigan and we're in a tough spot in Alpena, but I think Alpena's recovering.
Okay, great. That was a lot of great information. And then, Christy, moving into again, some of the legal side of things, what are some of the concerns that you have about this new fiscal situation?
Clients call with a lot of concerns, and one of my biggest concerns is that a client doesn't have an estate plan. They work so hard their whole life, and as Mark indicated, consumer spending, the jobs, and creating this wealth, and then at the time of their passing, they don't have an estate plan to properly pass it on to the individuals they want, whether it's leaving a legacy to a charity that was close to their heart, or just making sure that their children or grandchildren are taken care of. And an estate plan is the mechanism that I use to make sure the wealth is transferred the way they want. And with this, the new tax laws, clients ask me, well, are my heirs going to be taxed? And again, I kind of mentioned in the previous segment is you can pass $5.25 million without being taxed. But a lot of people want to pass their, or want to provide for their grandchildren's education. And we might be looking at a generation skipping tax at that point. So it's really important to plan, so that way, one, is we can maximize the estate planning laws, and two, maximize the generation skipping tax, where I guess I'll briefly describe that. Instead of me giving to my daughter, for example, I'm going to give to my grandchild. I am skipping my child to give to my grandchild. That is essentially the generation that skipped, so the generation that receives is taxed, and that is in addition to the estate tax. However, most people actually are not going to fall into the category that will have to pay the tax, but you want to meet with a professional to see where you fall if you're going to have to plan for that tax, and that's, again, estate planning. Because 70% of Americans do not have an estate plan, do not have a will, or do not have a trust. If they don't, then the state of Michigan, if you live in Michigan, the state of Michigan decides how your estate is going to be passed. You worked hard for your money. You want to control your money and where it goes from the grave.
Right, you shouldn't give that power to the state, who probably isn't going to give you as good of a deal as yourself or other estate planners could give. Okay, well, thanks, Christy. And then the other Christy, moving into some of your concerns with people, and who was hit the most by these new changes, as Mark was saying, with this uncertainty and with the fiscal cliff. Who was hit the most?
Well, other than the people I had mentioned in the last segment about the alternative minimum tax hitting, which is going to be probably a big topic of conversation in my firm this tax season. Outside of that, I would say the people that suffer the most, without a doubt, are the upper income individuals. And there is a lot of debate that goes on about that, because people think, I worked hard, I went to college, I strived my whole career to be successful, and now I'm going to pay my share and lots of other people's share also. So there is a great debate about that. Just a few things to note about how the upper income individuals are being hit. Once an employee's income reaches $200,000 in a given year, there is a 0.9% additional Medicare tax that they will pay that everybody else will not pay. In addition, a married filing joint tax return that has over $250,000 worth of net income, or excuse me, gross income on it, will pay an additional 3.8% surtax on their investment earnings, which is like dividends and interest and so forth. So just a few things there that are just totally for upper income individuals. And lastly, of course, their capital gains rates are 20%, whereas everybody else will pay either 0 or 15% capital gains.
Okay, and that's something that's concerning for you, because people, you want to encourage everybody, all three of you, to really pay attention to these tax laws and see how that's going to impact them in their future.
Right, and just a couple of things to close on. The top 5% of wage earners typically pay 58% of the tax in the United States, and 42% of United States residents pay no tax at all.
Wow.
So just a few things of interest.
Right, definitely give something people to think about for sure. And then moving on to our third segment of Insights, if you guys want to stay tuned, we'll be moving forward to 2013. What does this mean for the residents of Alpena, and what can you guys do to ensure your fiscal health? Stay tuned. Welcome back to this third and final installment of Insights, everybody. Right now we're going to discuss the future, 2013, and what people can expect and what they should be prepared for. So Mark, what can people expect going into 2013 regarding the markets and regarding their financial situations?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my crystal ball with me today, but that I get that a lot, because of all of the fog that we keep talking about, all the uncertainty. Again, like I said in the first segment, the economy is growing. We expect it to keep growing. I think there's going to be some volatility that's going to happen mid to late February that people need to be aware of, because whenever there's uncertainty, investors get nervous and they make money decisions, with their hearts instead of with their heads. So that said, I guess the couple things I would say is for people to have the right perspective on volatility, because the last thing I want to do is talk about volatility and scare people and have them change a good plan. Okay. You can't predict volatility. You can't predict bad markets. You can't predict recessions or wars. But what you can do is prepare for them. And what I would say to people is first of all, volatility is normal in the markets. What people should expect in a market when you're an investor is a 5% drop in your portfolio 3 times a year. In the last 105 years, we've averaged 3 5% drops a year, 1 10% drop a year, and a 20% drop every 3.5 years. That's normal. Only 55% of the time is the market positive, okay? Only 75% of the time do we get above 8%, and the other 25% of the time we're well below that negative. So when we tell people you're going to average 7 or 8% a year, there's only been about 10 times in the last 100 years that we've even done 8% in a given year. It's just what it averages out to be. So first of all, I would say is that volatility is normal and you should expect it. It's just part of the investing world. I guess the other thing I could say is in terms of preparing for that, so that when you prepare, you don't have to panic then when these kinds of things happen. What investors should be doing is making sure that they have a portfolio that's balanced to meet their risk tolerance, that they have diversification. The old adage, don't put your eggs in one basket, okay? And you buy high quality. Good companies and good investments that have been around 100, 200 years. And there's lots of companies out there like that are in managed portfolios. They've weathered these storms. They've seen the 15 recessions since 1930. So I think that's the important thing for investors, understand that volatility is out there, that the economy is still strong, because the bottom line too is that people who are saving and have a goal, they still want to retire with dignity. They still want to help their kids or grandkids through college, okay? And they want to leave a legacy. And the best way to do that is through investing.
Okay, great. Those are all some really great points, and again, just goes along with the theme of planning ahead and being aware of and being staying on top of the different changes in the market economy and in the financial world as well. Okay, and then Christy, going forward as well, you mentioned in the last segment that 70% of the country does not have a will and they don't have a plan. So what are some of the things that you think people can do moving into 2013 that could really help prepare them?
The biggest one is to meet with an attorney and set up a will or a will or a trust that create their estate plan. It's so critical. And I jotted some notes while Mark was speaking. He said prepare, and he gave the example of wanting to invest so an individual could provide for their grandchildren. That's what an estate plan can do after your passing, is making sure, and while you're alive too, if you have a trust, is to make sure that your investments are maximized, and then that way you can fund an estate plan to provide for your loved ones. And the thing I love is meeting with a CPA, a financial advisor, with my client, so then we can create a team that will ensure that your estate plan is not only carried out, your wishes are carried out, you leave a legacy, but it's funded with investments that allow it to happen. I've met with Christy and Mark on mutual clients, and we've done some amazing things and created estate plans that have
some longevity and some
longevity.
benefits.
And it gives the client a peace of mind that they are that they know what's going to happen. They can control their money, and they get peace with that. So with an estate plan, you have your will and your trust. And you also have powers of attorney that allow people, while you're living, when you're unable to make financial decisions or unable to make healthcare decisions, that's part of it too, making sure that's in place. And I just wanted to add, with the estate tax, there's a concept called portability, that if a husband passes first or a wife passes first, the other spouse can utilize the unused exemption, which would free up more money to be passed and tax-free. And that is something that an estate plan can utilize. So you get more bang for your buck.
Right, exactly, which is the thing that another common theme that we've been discussing is, it's your money, you've worked hard for it, what's the best thing that's going to preserve that money for you, for your grandkids, and for a legacy. So Christy, what are some things that you'd like to add to this general conversation of moving forward in 2013?
So a few things that I'll just mention that, rumors spread, and I hear quite often, well, my friend said, and this kind of thing. So maybe I'll clear up a few of those things. There's some reinstated tax credits that would have lapsed prior to the fiscal cliff deal, so maybe I'll just mention a few of those that are back in place now. One of them is writing off sales tax in lieu of state income taxes if you itemize deductions on Schedule A. If you make a major purchase of a vehicle or something like that, it may actually be beneficial to use sales tax instead. Deductions for teachers on reimbursed classroom supplies up to $250. That's a great deduction for teachers. The adoption credit is back in place, which holds near and dear to my heart. If a taxpayer is over the age of 70 and a half, they can transfer up to $100,000 tax-free from an IRA directly to a charity. So if somebody is doing some estate tax planning, or they're thinking ahead about whatever charity it may happen to be that's near and dear to them, they can support them, remove some money from their IRA that previously would have been taxed to their heirs. And lastly, the American Opportunity Tax Credit for tuition has been reinstated, so that's a great thing to think about.
And what is that tax, again, American Opportunity?
For tuition credits for college. And probably the last thing I'll mention is that medical deductions, if you itemize deductions on Schedule A, medical expenses used to be 7.5% of adjusted gross income, had to be at least that much before anything counted. Now it's 10%. So it's going to be a little harder to deduct medical if you ever could before. So that's probably the
Okay.
best thing.
So again, some food for thought. And do you guys have anything else that you want to wrap up? Just one last bit of advice to anybody out there who's watching, who's really interested and has gotten the wheels turning a little bit.
I guess I'd like to mention one thing. Is part of 2013 is we do have a step up in basis, meaning if someone passes and you're left with an investment, you get a step up in basis, meaning you get the fair market value. Actually, this is probably more your question. I'm sorry, Mark.
That's okay. No, you can have it.
Meaning you would start from the fair market value, which saves an individual a lot of money in the future.
Okay, great.
Let me just add one more thing really quick here, because it is one more topic that's coming up all the time, and it's timely, is that investors right now who are looking in the rearview mirror at their portfolios that have done really, really well with all the volatility that we've had, and they're probably loving their bond portfolio, okay? And the thing that they need to keep in mind, and this is just a word of warning, is we are at a 50-year low in interest rates. That means bond prices are at a 50-year high. Bernanke's talking about sometime in 2015 or 14 raising interest rates. I think the one thing investors need to understand going forward is the fundamentals are strong for the economy. There's probably more risk in the bond market right now than there is in the stock market because we are at a 50-year high. It hasn't been since the late 1800s that we've had a bond market that's been this extreme. Wow. And so when he starts raising interest rates, people need to keep in mind that a 1% hike in interest rates down the road means a 12% drop in bond prices. So the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges just from a particular investment is in my office, is making sure that people understand about their bond holdings and that the bonds that they love today, that they're looking in the rearview mirror on, aren't going to be the same bonds that they're going to be looking at in the next year or two. So I think that would just be one little piece of specific advice, is be careful of your bond portfolios, because I think the bond market's going to be very, very different a year or two out.
Okay, well, thanks so much for all of your input and all of your advice for all of our viewers out there. And we hope that you guys learned something here today. I certainly did. You know, not really my cup of tea, but I think I can kind of take this home with me as well. So if you guys want to stay tuned next week to Insights, we will be back with some more great information. See you then.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.